Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today, where we'll be discussing how to utilize Vineyard insights to make informed decisions. We are thrilled to have you join us today for this informative session presented by VineView. My name is Natalie Collins, and I'm the president here at the California Association of Wine Grape Growers. In today's dynamic and ever-evolving wine industry, staying ahead of the curve is crucial for success. Making well-informed decisions based on accurate data and actionable insights is paramount, especially in the vineyard, where every decision directly impacts grape quality, yield, and ultimately wine production. During this webinar, our expert presenters from VineView will share their knowledge, experience, and cutting-edge technology to demonstrate how these insights can transform your approach to vineyard management. Presenting today from VineView will be Raul Pena, VP of Global Sales, and Melissa Staid, EVP of Business Development. They are also joined by special guest Ken Swegles, owner and vineyard consultant with Rhizos Consulting out of Santa Cruz. Ken will be sharing real-world examples from the vineyard and how he has been able to utilize the services of VineView to make informed vineyard decisions. Now let's get started with the webinar. I encourage you all to submit any questions that you may have in the questions tab as we go. Questions will either be answered live in the dashboard or we'll host a Q&A at the conclusion of the webinar. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded, which I'm happy to provide to each of you a link to that once it is processed. And now without further delay, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Raul.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Yes, I am Raul Pena, the head of sales for VineView, and I'm joined by Melissa Staid, who is not only our EVP of Business Development, but also a co-founder of the company. The company was founded over 20 years ago, back when my hair was not gray. And right now we are expanding our presence throughout not only California, but we're also present in France. And we have had opportunities to work in the Pacific Northwest. VineView is a company that has been primarily focused on offering the high quality services of aerial imagery converted into usable, actionable data. And by that, we say that we're going to give you insight into what's going on in your vineyard in a timely manner and an ability for you to see data very quickly, like usually within 3 days of our collecting the data. We also have chosen to fly aircraft as opposed to other technologies, principally because of the precision and the ability to have the flexibility to cover large areas. So in fact, we do have a hangar in Angwin near Napa, and we fly 2 of our aircraft out of that hangar throughout the state. Without further ado, I'd like to also introduce our special guest, Ken Swegles. Ken is the owner and the principal consultant for his company. He also has a vineyard and also has been working with us for several years, so he's very familiar with the services. So we thought it would be ideal from his perspective and also from your perspective in the audience to hear real world exactly what's happening in the field. So with that, why don't we begin? What we're going to do today is we're going to go through a very quick agenda, just to give you an idea that when we had promoted this event, we want to make sure that we honor the commitments that we made in terms of what we're going to share. So today we're going to talk about simple things like the vineyard balance or the uniformity within the actual vineyard itself. We're also going to talk about yield estimation and the idea of harvest optimization to make sure that you have maximum return on your investment. Coupled with the fact that we want to get high quality out of those vineyards. Another unique aspect of VineView is that we offer a solution in the area of disease detection. We'll elaborate that further in the presentation, but you'll find that not only is it a quite useful tool, but it's unique to VineView. And then, of course, the hot button in the state of California with concerns about SGMA and other regulations. We recognize irrigation is a really specific area that everyone is concerned about, and we have some ideas about how we can help you with regard to monitoring the irrigation use and how you can help not only in compliance, but also in controlling costs. And then finally, we'll talk briefly about the fact that we can give you data related to the topography and soil variations within the various elevations within your vineyard. Clearly, there are different issues regarding that. So we want to make sure that you have all the data available that reflects not only the topography of the vineyard, but also the soil amendment. So with that, let's dive in. I'd like to start here, first of all, by talking about the fact that, and we will be having both Melissa and Ken comment. And by the way, you do have the ability to ask questions in the chat. So if you have any questions you'd like to ask, feel free to pose them and we can either answer them during or after the end of this presentation. So we feel that every vineyard block is unique. Every one of them has a story to tell based on the varietals and such. So we have the ability with our data that we will provide you, not only to compare blocks to blocks, but you could actually look at an individual block and focus on those particular areas, or you can look at other like blocks to see how all are performing. And we also want to make sure that you know that when we provide you this data, as you see in the visual, those dots represent a vine. So when we, for example, work with you, we will ask you for the shape file, the boundaries of the map of the vineyard that you want us to look at. And we'll also ask you for vine spacing. And that allows us to then designate a circle to each vine. And in effect, you have the ability to detect exactly what's going on in each row with each vine. So with that, let me ask Melissa to comment. Would you please?
Sure. So the beauty of the vine by vine, while it seems like a lot of very specific data, is that by doing so, we are removing the soil and cover crop in the background. So we're giving you what we call the pure canopy view of the vineyard. And we can see in the next slide that that's going to allow you to extract critical quantitative information. So it's much more than just a photo. It actually has what we call vine metrics associated with it. And those vine metrics, because they're quantifiable, can be tracked through time on a consistent scale. Our scale is a fixed scale. And so you can see from one location to the next and one flight to the next how your management practices have made a positive impact on the uniformity of the vineyard.
Yes, and Cam, would you like to comment as well?
Yeah, sure. The vine metrics in specific are extremely useful for us for crop estimations, for example. What we've done is utilize each of these colors and then gone through and taken, cluster counts per vine using the historic weights. We're able to dial in our crop estimates extremely accurately with this specific task right here.
Excellent. Thank you, Ken. We also are using this to identify canopy gaps. And Melissa, I'll ask you to expand on that as well.
Sure. So this is, on the last slide, there were missing vines were in white, or what we call undetected vines. They're in the white where it says 449. Now, the difference of the canopy gaps slide is that it allows you to see missing canopy on a finer scale. So if you have one arm that is dead or not productive, we're gonna pick that up. And then when you look at the histogram associated with it, shown as the two bars there, red and green, you can get a % of canopy gaps in there. And if you had quite a bit, this is about 4%. In this case, if you had quite a bit, that would obviously affect your yield in the end. And so you can calculate or factor that in when you're doing a yield estimate. And also obviously for making replanting decisions, if you have a large percentage of canopy gaps, that vineyard could potentially be replanted.
Thank you. Also, I want to go back to this slide here. One of the things that makes VineView unique is that we utilize a technology called EVI, or an Enhanced Vigor Index. I'm sure you're all familiar with NDVI. NDVI has been around for a very long time. What we've found is that EVI is much more precise because it does not have any impact from the atmospheric conditions, and depending upon the time of day when we do a flight, it will not vary. So if you do a flight in the morning or in the afternoon, you'll still get the same kind of data as opposed to NDVI, which can vary depending upon the time of day. So I wanted to make sure I highlight that. So next in our presentation is crop health. And we wanted to address the idea that There are adjustments that have to be made along the way. What we're finding with many of our clients is that multiple flights are ideal, but we're not advocating a lot of flights. Our premise is pick our spots. Let's fly only on those times of the season that are most valuable to you as the vineyard manager or owner or overseeing the performance of the vineyard. So we like to use the analogy that we provide you a movie as opposed to a snapshot, whereas you can actually look maybe one time at a single vineyard and see where it happens to be in that time of the year. Could be, for example, in Berezin. We highly recommend doing this over time. So I'll ask Melissa to elaborate on that, please.
Sure. The zone maps can be used in a lot of different ways, and I'm sure Ken can help us with this as well. But as Raul mentioned, we do like to provide images during around bloom, veraison, and pre-harvest. And there are different strategies of using these zone maps at those different times. In the earlier flights, you can use them for tissue sampling, and determining, scouting for areas of weakness. We recommend that you hit all the zones, low, medium, and high in that sampling. And then because our histogram would provide the number of acres in each zone, you can calculate how many acres are affected, be it low vigor or high vigor. At veraison, those zone maps can also help you with any sort of cluster counts, again, refining your yield estimates. And then finally, as you get towards harvest, it can help if you plan to do a segmented harvest, deciding which areas are best for harvesting sooner versus later. And then planning for the previous year, those zone maps can help you make decisions related to pruning and also soil amendments to improve your weak areas. But Ken, you probably have a dozen other ideas in that as well.
Yeah, you covered most of them there. Another aspect we've used these zone maps for is volume of our emitters in our vineyard, or putting secondary drip lines up. So but in the weaker section, we might put, a 1 or 2 gallon, or as they get weaker, maybe up to a 5 gallon per hour emitter, because sometimes these zones are delineating water stress. And again, with nutrients in mind, that higher volume we can then utilize with fertigation too, and dial in those zones a bit more specifically as needed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you, Ken.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a nice transition to this area. And Ken, I want to ask you to maybe continue on this area, the idea of harvest optimization. Do you want to comment on how you use the bigger zones?
Absolutely. So, if I have a crew that's faster or slower, we'll send the fast crew to the heavier zones. These are also very useful for winemakers. I'm a winemaker myself. And so, again, going back to yields, to potential yields, these maps really help us dial in logistics for which crews go where and how much tonnage we're getting out of them.
And that's an important area. We do find that the data we provide gives the decision makers, the people who make the call on how to use the data, you can direct your resources more efficiently and effectively. So in effect, and I'll ask Melissa to comment on this, you can set priorities as to where you want to dedicate your resources during the harvest period to maximize the harvest and to allow the grapes to mature in the orderly fashion. So let me ask Melissa, could you comment on this map?
Sure. So, we find that the lower vigor areas tend to ripen sooner. And so again, if you're considering doing a segmented harvest, these maps can guide you in this image. If you just decided to divide it into 2 partial harvests, you might want to harvest the green later and the yellow and red earlier. Of course, that could be confirmed by, just doing brick sampling. And then, as Ken mentioned, getting the crews in there to improve efficiency according to how fast they are, or, how many people you have in each crew. And this can result in a significant cost savings. And almost all of our clients get a really high return on investment using our products. So it shouldn't be viewed as an extra cost getting the images, because you're actually going to save quite a bit of money by employing these strategies.
Also, I should mention, and we're going to show this to you a little bit later here, is that everything you're seeing right now, all these depictions, you and the users in the field could take these on an iPhone or an iPad type technology in the field, walk around. It tells you exactly where you are in the field at a given time. So you actually can take the data with you and are using it in the field as you go. So this data is only as good as its utility. And we're saying with our technology, ultimately the value is the mobile app, is having that handheld information at your disposal. So related to that is we also have the ability to provide different types of data, because the sensors that we use and the equipment that we have on our planes, which by the way, the technology that we have is proprietary on our planes. It's also probably worth 5 times the value of the plane itself. So you can imagine a high level of technology and specificity. In the case of thermal, we recently upgraded the thermal cameras. We have the highest resolution thermal cameras that are available. And part of the reason we do this is because our founders, both Melissa and her husband, Matt, hail from a background of technology in areas like JPL and NASA, where at one point Matt was working on mapping the surface of the moon, if you can imagine that. And that technology, he said, well, I can use this in reverse and use it in a terrestrial application. And why not in my favorite area of agriculture, which was vineyards? So that's the benefit. That's what we took, that knowledge, that experience, applied it in our environment. The other thing I should mention also, as it ties to this, is that VineView has a commitment as our mission to support feeding the world. That sounds very broad, but the vision is really true. We're committed to maximize the utility of technology, to use that for the betterment of mankind. And we say that with all candor, that our mission is really to accomplish that. So it ties back to all the things you've seen, how we utilize water, how we manage the use of nutrients, how we help you get the most return out of your investment so you can provide the quality products that you all produce. So once again, just want to make sure you know that that's where we're coming from. Our company is small, it's been growing. Our desire is to be the best at what we can do, and we want to give that service to you. So an example here is the irrigation. Everybody knows that we're suffering from the challenges of weather changes, the fact that we have to deal with the ongoing regulation concerns. So I want to ask Ken, if you could comment, how do you take our data and apply it in irrigation challenges?
Yeah, so not to reiterate the first thing I mentioned about different size emitters, but that is a key aspect. Secondary drip lines with this whole drought have been super crucial for us. I'm able to take the data, screenshot it, draw on it, send it to my vineyard foreman and say, put secondary drip lines in all the red zones. It's just very simple. So great maps, like you said, in the field with the guys. We were able to really maximize our water usage over the last few years with these maps, and really dialing in what zones need what. And we're actually seeing, a lot of these zones become more green over the last few years because of this management aspect. So it's been extremely useful.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. Melissa, could you explain what we're looking at here?
Sure. This is a thermal image. And what it's showing is in the darker colors, the blacks are the cooler areas, and the kind of yellow bright colors are hotter areas. In this particular image, we chose this to display because there is a leak that is occurring within that red circle. A wet area that was about 2 weeks later found to have a big weed bloom. So this was, an early detection. You couldn't see anything else at the time on the, in the image, except that it was cooler there. And then taking early action on that would have, of course, saved a lot of water. So that was just one example of how the thermal image can help save water early on. And then there's potential, of course, of having hot spots from clogged lines as well. So over time, seeing these images a couple times, you can see what the natural pattern is in the vineyard. And then if there's any unexpected changes in that, can help pinpoint irrigation problems.
And I'll share the next slide, which is also, Melissa, if you can explain.
Yeah,
this as
so
well.
this one's a little bit different. Here we're looking at a broader pattern that I believe is related to soil water holding capacity. So this is near a stream, and stream channels obviously shift through time, and this is resulting in a temperature pattern that is related to how much water the vines are getting due to the different soil types.
Great, thank you. So, so with that, just want to make sure you're aware that in the process of irrigation management, we do work very closely with the vineyard managers, for example. And I should mention that everything you're seeing, including the fact that we suggested flights potentially post-bloom, at veraison, and pre-harvest, we also are very flexible in terms of when we fly, because we want to make sure that you feel that you have control. So we will notify the client of the fact that we're planning to fly within 2 weeks, and you have a period of time within which you're welcome to reach out to us, let us know, I'd rather you delay that flight, or can you do it sooner? Lately, for example, because this year bloom has been a little bit delayed, we've had many requests for us to postpone the first flight for a week or two. And once again, we're more than happy to do what you're asking, and we have the flexibility. So this area here is one that I'm particularly excited about, because we've had a lot of good feedback, and several of our clients not only have adopted this previously, but are using it on a regular basis now. This is our disease detection, or what we call red leaf scouting. Red leaf scouting is really just that. It allows us post-harvest to be able to fly over a particular area of red varietal, and as anything that looks like is a potential to have a disease in terms of a red leaf indication, we will then share that with you so that you can direct your scouts to that particular spot to allow you the ability to then attack that problem early on. That's one of the reasons why when we fly, because this is such a brief period of time when this is visible, we suggest that you send your scouts out immediately to go and check those spots. Now, part of our precision work that we do with regards to red leaf is that it may not show up on one flight. So we tend to fly at least twice over the same area to make sure that we double check to see if there's anything we may have missed, or maybe we didn't get it on the first flight, on the second flight we do. So you can be confident if we send you a red leaf scouting report or visual, it's because we have actually identified something that's there. Also, I'd like to mention that the idea of red blotch, leaf roll, any of those other diseases that could be a result, we don't do the diagnosis, nor do we prescribe a solution. Our job is to let you know that there is a potential problem, so that you can then go out and it may be nothing, or it could be something that could be an ideal find for you before it becomes a bigger problem. We had occasion to work up in the Pacific Northwest, where they're suffering a great deal of red blotch. And those customers who have used our product to see what they can see have found it to be invaluable. So we do encourage you to take a look, see if you'd like to try this particular product, since as far as we know, there are no other imagery companies that offer this solution. The same thing applies in terms of the data we provide you. That disease detection is shown in a graphic format, so you can see the impact it has potentially in your vineyard. So if it's prolific, you'll see a higher percentage. In this case, it's very low, and that's where we want to keep it. We want to identify it and keep it low. So next year, when you do the same flight, you'll see it's been eradicated or it's been minimized. So once again, we want to make sure that you're aware that this is an offering that is unique to VineView. Melissa, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I mean, obviously for a lot of these diseases, there's not a cure other than roguing. However, we do have a lot of clients that have, detected early on and been able to see the source of the disease. So be it a neighbor's vineyard or a stream channel that is, hosting vectors, and thereby getting that information early on, able to rogue and not lose the whole vineyard due to it.
Okay, thank you. Ken, I don't know, did you have a comment on red leaf?
Sure. Yeah, we've used these maps for dialing in our zones a lot better. So like bird boxes, we've put around all those areas because a lot of times they're vectored by certain insects, as we know. For the leaf roll blocks, we've used it on. We've used these maps for bark stripping so that we can get our basically ameliorate the niches for the mealybugs. What else have we used it on? Oh, Pierce disease. Yeah, we've seen in the Santa Cruz Mountains a bit more xylella than red blotch or leaf roll. So we're using that for roguing Pierce disease vines as well. And actually this year we're going to see if we can utilize those maps to inject that new product they have. You can actually put like a vaccine for the Pierce disease now. I forget the name of it, but we're going to use the maps to maximize our efficacy for application there as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Ken.
Sure.
So next, just a brief topic here. We talk about the fact that we do use the USGS mapping overlay over our data, so you can actually see the elevations and the differences in soil. So once again, I'll come back to Melissa if you could elaborate.
So this, being able to visualize the interaction of the slopes, topography, and soil relative to the vigor maps can just be really useful for determining if you how those interactions are playing out, and can inform decisions regarding irrigation modification. A lot of our clients are going to be putting in double poly to deal with the thinner soil, say at the top of slopes, and soil amendments to increase the water holding capacity. So this is just another layer of data that helps you visualize those interplays.
And Ken, how about yourself? Comment?
Yes, we've used maps as well. A lot of times it's for post-harvest granular applications. We're doing mostly for irrigation, but these maps have been great for our weights and what we're doing per plant. So in these sections that were weaker, I can give a map to the vineyard foreman and say we're going 8 ounces per vine in this section and 16 ounces in this weaker section. So they've been very useful for post-harvest fertilizers, actually.
Excellent. Thank you. So before we go into our Q&A, I wanted to share with you that everything you've just seen is available in your pocket. You now have a tool in your hands, your cell phones or your iPad type technology. Everything that we just shared with you would be sent to you over a 3-day period. Usually it's about 3 days is average, for you to be able to then have the power of the data. Now, we don't expect everyone to magically overnight know how to use the data as effectively, for example, as Ken, who's been using this for years now. But we do offer training and ongoing support. So the idea that, yes, this seems like almost overwhelming, all this data, all these pictures, all this imagery. What does this mean? How do I use it? It's not just a pretty picture, but what is exactly going to do with it? Well, our commitment in VineView is that you only get the value out of your data if you use it. And we want to make sure that you're comfortable using it to the point where it becomes second nature and you know exactly where to go to find what you're looking for. You also saw that because there's such a long menu of things available, there may be only 1 or 2 things that you really feel are important to you, or maybe a particular block that you want to look at that's more important than another, or for that matter, even the time of year that's more critical to you than another. All that data and all that ability is there. It's just a matter of learning how to use it. And quite frankly, it's pretty easy to use. We've recently made some enhancements to the app. It's downloadable on for either iOS or Android on App Store, and literally you can have access to it immediately. We also have a demo. If you're all interested, you can actually go on our website at VineView.com and see a demo version of what you just saw. So you could, kind of play with it, see what exactly you would get with imagery and what kind of data it would provide you. All of that being said, we are at your disposal to work with you to make sure you're comfortable. The head of that customer support is Melissa, and we do various training sessions where we can bring your entire team, vineyard managers, winemakers, whomever, on a call like this, and we can walk you through exactly how to use it. So you should be very comfortable that the data is only as good as the value you get, and our commitment is that you get value. And as you can see here, you can get different kinds of data. So let me just ask Melissa before we go to Q&A. Anything you want to comment on regarding the app?
Yeah, and so the most real powerful part of this is that you see that blue dot. It's going to show you where you're standing in the vineyard. We'll travel with you. And that way you can navigate to those zones or those individual vines to scout, sample, make adjustments, whatever is necessary to really get the most out of the data and optimize your vineyard uniformity.
Excellent, thank you. Ken, last comment on using the app.
The app is great. I'm on my phone now. It's basically my computer, I'm constantly using that in the field. So this app is fantastic. You can go in any other vineyard without Wi-Fi. I've used it too. It's very solid. And again, when you're sampling or giving it to your scouts, the real live GPS is very useful for sampling different sections within the same block, within the same, varietal. Because as you guys previously mentioned, in these red sections compared to the green sections, your numbers may be off. It could be 20 bricks in one section, 22, and down on the same row. So it's extremely useful. We've gotten a lot of great feedback from it from a lot of our clients as well.
Excellent, thank you. So Natalie, I want to come back to you if you want to head up our Q&A session.
Of course, Melissa, Raul, and Ken, thank you guys very much for sharing that information about VineView. I want to remind everyone that we did record this webinar, and I will provide each of you that recording once it is processed. If you guys do have questions, you can go ahead and type them in the Q&A box on your dashboard, and we'll get to those. A couple questions that came in, Ken and Raul and Melissa are talking about the number of flights that you recommend. I know you talked a lot about working with the grower to time those flights, but in a typical season, how many flights do you recommend?
I do 2 a year if possible. Sorry, Raul. I try to go 50% bloom and 50% veraison. If a client can afford more flights, that's great. We doing at harvest 2 and one at 10-inch. But I think the maximum efficacy for us is 2 flights a year, bloom and veraison. Yeah,
thank you. I was going to mention we have a wide spectrum. We have a super user who has us fly every week. That's quite unique. It's a lot of data, but this individual likes data, so they choose to have us fly every week. But we have many customers who fly only at veraison. That seems to be the most popular time of year. Once again, many of those same clients, we've helped them realize that that's a snapshot in time. There might be some value in seeing the evolution of the vineyard and what's changed, especially if you had to make any modifications or improvements after you see the first set of data. You want to be able to see the results, that there was actually a change. So that's why we recommend, to the point that you just heard from Ken, a minimum of 2 to 3 flights, ideally. But we can do 1, or we can do all season if you like. That's really your choice. Melissa, did you want to comment on that?
I think you guys pretty much covered everything. The early, if you're going to just go for 1 flight, people do tend to do it around veraison, but I definitely recommend the early side of veraison for several reasons. One, that it gives you some time to actually act on the data. And then secondly, of course, living in California, we have fires and smoke all the time. So the sooner you do it, the better quality of the data you're going to get.
And thank you guys for commenting on the timing of flights. That was going to be my next question, along with how many flights and when is the best time for accurate data. So thank you for sharing that. What are the costs of your guys' service for flying? Say you recommend 2 times a year. What does that look like?
The pricing is really subject to the number of acres and the number of flights. So it varies dependent upon how frequently we would fly for you and to what extent. So we would invite you to contact us, and we would take, of course, your maps, if you provide us the maps and also the vine spacing, and then we can provide you with a very specific quotation. Also, because we are anxious to bring on new clientele, we are going to be providing some form of a discount to new customers to invite you to try us. Although I will say that our prices are considered to be quite competitive, and I think you'll be pleased to see our rates. Natalie, back to you.
Thank you, Raul. And then I know you guys talked a lot about the opportunities with VineView to do different disease scouting. What would you guys recommend as the proper time to do red leaf scouting after harvest?
Melissa?
So we do that in the fall. We usually fly sort of the end of September, and then we'll fly again in October just to capture the window of when those symptoms are being most expressed. So we work with the client to make sure that we capture that data appropriate for the varietal. Some varietals are going to express disease earlier than others, and so we try to work with them to capture that window.
Thank you. Ken, I was very encouraged to hear how you're using it for Pierce disease scouting as well.
Yeah, so that's been great. Deficiencies as well, Pierce disease. I think the best time to fly depends on the vineyard, of course. Sometimes there's different senescence patterns relating to water stress, whether it's dry farmed or not, et cetera. So I think, and also it depends on the year. So this year we're seeing some sites that are tracking 5 weeks late. So I think it's very site specific. You just go out there, and when we start to see the initial senescence patterns, that'd be the time to make the call.
Well, thank you, everyone. I think a great question to end on is just what's next for VineView. I feel like you guys have come so far. The app sounds great, being able to track in real time where you're at within the vineyard and find the locations that are highlighted. Are there any kind of new things that you're working on, or what's next for VineView?
Yeah, I can answer that. Initial, Raul probably has more to say, but something that people are really excited about is a product we're working on that will give you a block by block analysis of the crop coefficient. So those numbers can be specifically entered into your irrigation calculations. And as opposed to sensors that might only be looking at one portion of the vineyard, we are using the footprint of the vines to calculate a crop coefficient that's can be averaged over the entire block. So you get all that very precise data.
Yeah, and also I mentioned earlier that we are also very prolific in France. For example, Bordeaux region, we're almost the exclusive provider of imagery there, and we fly some of the name brands that you would recognize right away. In those areas, those clients are always looking for new techniques, new approaches. For example, there's a lot of concerns about cover crop, especially because of they use more of a regenerative approach, and they also have different issues with the trellis sizing and where they grow and the row width and so on. So we're using that as almost a test bed, and much of what we're doing there will transfer it to the States. In particular, we've been looking at something called a variable rate application. You probably heard of VRA, where we are actually working with an application we're calling speed tracking, where the individuals on the ground on a tractor with the iPad or iPhone can be directed to where to start and stop in a particular zone, to where they may need to have less nutrient or more nutrient, or pesticides or whatever they're distributing. It literally guides them as to where to allocate those resources so that there's no waste and there's no overuse. So that's coming soon. You also heard about the crop coefficient. We're doing some experimentation in California with some specific clients who have opened up their vineyards to allow us to study leaves, study the stems, go into great detail with the viticulturists and so on. I should also mention, by the way, that we do have a lot of interaction with the viticulturists themselves. Enologists have been showing some interest in what we do, even there. So we are active in the ASEV, for example. We'll be at that conference in June in Napa. So we're constantly looking at the science of the business and making sure that we're looking for new ways to contribute to your success and ultimately give you new solutions. So absolutely, we're always on the leading edge when it comes to R&D.
Thank
So Natalie,
you
any
both.
other questions?
Yeah, no, thank you both, Melissa and Raul, for that. And if any CAWG members are attending the ASEV conference in Napa, we do have a discount code for you to use. So if you do need that, please do reach out. But with that, I want to thank everybody for joining our webinar today. As a reminder, I will send that recording to everybody and include both Melissa and Raul's contact information. As they shared earlier, they're more than willing to walk you through a demo of how to use the app and talk more through all that VineView can do for you and bringing more efficiency into your vineyard. So with that, Melissa, Raul, and Ken, thank you guys so much for joining us today. And we will see all of you guys soon.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.